Welcome, everybody. It's nice to be here and to see so many familiar faces. I want to welcome everyone in the Afar region, in the 3 countries in which you're located, in Eritrea, Djibouti, and in Ethiopia, but also very much the diaspora, not just in Canada, but in every country in the world in which you have settled, usually by circumstances beyond your own choice. It's because you've been forced to do so, and we regret that. That's not right. And my involvement with the Afar was based on that. Some 20 years ago, I started representing some of you and others as individuals in your asylum claims in Canada. And through that experience, over a period of 20 years, learned a lot about what was taking place in that part of the world for you and your fellow Afar family members. And so with that background of interest and knowledge, even though very little has been written about the Afar people, the little that is describes the marginalization, the impoverishment, but even more in my case and interest, the persecution of the Afar people in primarily Eritrea, but to a lesser extent also existing in Djibouti. That was my connection with the Afar people. And that very naturally for me, but also for you, led to a very small conference that took place at Carleton University in August of 2006, and I was one of a small number of people invited to speak at that. And we had some parliamentarians there, some human rights advocates and activists, some diplomats from the Ethiopian government, and many of you here today, and others that couldn't be here, and others still that are watching in or will watch the video that comes from this. And that was, for me, you could call it the tipping point, because up until then, I had never been to Africa, though I'd represented hundreds and hundreds of cases from many different countries of Africa, and always in my mind wanted to go, but wanted to be somehow connected to the going and the people there in a very meaningful way. And it was you people that invited me to speak at that conference, and that very day, in August 2006, invited me to go to the Afar region. And something happened for me, which Brad described in his own remarks, that it was a turning point. And it was almost a dream come true that I could both go to Africa, but even in a more important way, connect with people there that needed some experience and expertise in something that I could do. But the list, as you know, is very long, and it was very difficult to plan a trip, my first of now 9 trips. How could you plan a trip when the objectives are so broad and so deep and long and so numerous that you would, in a period of 3 weeks, crisscross the Afar region only of Ethiopia? It wouldn't be possible for us then as now to go to Eritrea, or in my case, because I've also condemned many times over the treatment of the Afar by the Djibouti government. I wasn't prepared then as now to go to Djibouti because of the personal risks that may bring to myself and the entourage. So Ethiopia being a place that we could safely go and work with both the state and federal government that has been supportive of the Afar and granted them some sense of independence, at least at the state level, in managing their own affairs within Ethiopia. That would be the place we would go. But while there, it was very clear to me and Ahmed and others that we met that we would have the chance to meet with, interview Afar from Eritrea and from Djibouti, who had, not by their own choice, as I said earlier, but by circumstances beyond their control, had been forced to flee their countries and come to the Afar region of Ethiopia. So with that very broad and deep opportunity to meet with, listen to, learn from Afar elders, politicians, women, to see the circumstances of the refugees and the impoverishment of the Afar there, who could barely, by their own circumstances, support themselves in Ethiopia, but now being forced to support a very growing and significant number of Afar in exile from primarily Eritrea. We set about to start a humanitarian organization. And I come today to speak as a delegate of that organization, as the president of the Kango Afar Foundation. And our foundation, just very clearly and for the record, is a humanitarian organization. It's not a political organization. It is an NGO that delivers humanitarian aid for the relief of poverty. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And so we started this organization, as Brad said, the beginning of it was in 2006. It became really operational in 2007. And so the projects that we do have to do only with the relief of poverty. And the relief of poverty, of course, is a charitable object under our tax laws here in Canada. And it can be very broad. And in the case of our projects, it means things like looking after the health of the Afar people. We have shipped medical equipment, medical supplies, and medical expertise to the Afar region to help with an improved medical and health outcomes for the Afar people, primarily children and women, some of whom are the refugees of which I spoke. We have also deployed a Canadian water filter technology to eliminate and deal with cholera in a particular small remote village of the Afar region, and that has been successful. We have also shipped clothing, food, and water to remote areas of the Afar region within Ethiopia, again, as I said, because we cannot reach into Djibouti or Eritrea yet, although it's my dream to do so one day, and I think collectively all of us here and those who are tuned into this believe in the same goal that we have in that respect. Clothing, food, drought-affected areas have received water from the support of Canadians and others. But still, there was something troubling me because as much as I devoted my time and my passion and enthusiasm, in the words of Brad, to these humanitarian objects deployed by the Kango Afar Foundation, I saw something that I neither had the expertise or the ability to deal with, and that was the growing number of refugees that were coming from Eritrea. And this was very troubling for me because I realized that I had, and so too did our foundation, had a very limited capacity to deal with the growing number of refugees. It didn't matter how many water filters we built, how much food and clothing and medical equipment and experience and expertise we shipped or deployed there. There was still this troubling issue of the Afar refugees coming from Eritrea that were now by that point in the tens of thousands. I think the estimate today is now 120,000. So I started reading about that, spending more time on that, doing, in fact, more asylum claims here in Canada on that. But by complete luck and coincidence, I ran into my old friend, Professor Joe Magnet. And we hadn't seen each other for some years, and so we were very enthusiastic to reconnect and to receive from each other updates about, what the previous years had meant to each other. Joe, what had you been doing? And Warren, what had you been doing? And to my great amazement and absolute appreciation, Joe showed a lot of interest in what we had been doing with the Kango Afar Foundation, deploying humanitarian work into the Afar region. But I told him the troubling experience that I'd seen with something that I had no ability or experience or expertise to deal with, and that was what was taking place across the border and in places I couldn't get to, and the suffering that was being visited upon the Afar people. And Joe Magnet very importantly for us, is one of the world's leading experts on constitutional law, in particular federalism, and in particular within federalism and the states that have federal forms of constitution. His expertise has to do with the protection of minority rights, and in particular Aboriginal minority rights. And in fact, he has been the advisor to many governments of the world, not just Canada, but other governments of the world, on their constitutional framework. And not only has he advised governments on good governance practices and compliance with international law, but he has also challenged governments who have not lived up to international standards. So he is one of the world's leading advocates on not just constitutional law and federalism and minority rights, but also the rights of Aboriginals. And when those rights have been trampled upon, what kinds of remedies are available to people like the Afar to seek redress, to overcome, and set the record right for people like the Afar. So quite naturally, Joe came to our issue with his expertise and his interest and enthusiasm, and we are massively thankful for all the effort that Professor Joe Magnet has done for us, and in particular you Afar people. And I say now, Joe and I have received Afar citizenship, so it is our people. We are Afar people, because we believe so much in what you do. And so Joe has been to the Afar region now twice, will come with us soon a third time. He complements, let's say, my energy and enthusiasm with his intellectual powers, his scholarly expertise and so forth, something that I don't have, and something that we so deeply needed then as now. And so he has taken and moved the goalposts well beyond what was possible by me or anyone else in this room and beyond. And he has taken our issue, the Afar people's issue, and he has studied it and written about it and drafted a new constitutional framework for Eritrea, which is a vision not just for the Afar people, but for all the nationalities of Eritrea, so that that country can become a safe, secure, and prosperous country, which is deserved by its people, which is the reason it fought for its independence now 23 years ago, which is why Afar and other blood was shed, because those dreams and aspirations were not possible at the time. And so Joe brings this incredible and powerful intellectual ability. He is a true statesman. He's been given that title by the Afar people who have welcomed him. You have welcomed him. All Afar people, all elders, all politicians. He has a mandate from the Afar people to do the very important work that has not been done. It's so needed and so important and has not been done. It's a great opportunity for us to listen and learn from my friend, Professor Joe Magnet, who I welcome to now come and address us.